main points make hard is we don't know who to have conversations with.
Yeah.
And that at least gives you a hint.
A lot of businesses these days are trying to figure out the equation for creativity, imagination, innovation. Here at Menlo, we've focused on kindergarten skills, kindergarten space, the creativity and imagination that many of us remember from those earliest days in school when, in fact, when they measure kids in school these days, those are the times that kids are actually express the most creativity. And somehow, between those first days in kindergarten till, quite frankly, their graduation from the university, we've somehow drummed that creativity out of them. When I was teaching at a large Midwestern university, I found the class I was teaching and had all the tables bolted down to the floor. You couldn't even move the tables. Right there, that physical constraint begins to limit how we think about problem solving, how we think about innovation. Here in our company, we make the space incredibly flexible. We make it so that the tables can be moved around, so that the pull downs from the ceiling allow the team to put the space in any configuration they want. We have people in close collaboration with one another, literally sharing two people to one table, sitting shoulder to shoulder, noisy environment, just like kindergarten. We expect those kind of skills from our team, that they can work well with others, that they can play well with others, that they can run experiments, that they're allowed to make mistakes along the way. All of these things start with the physical manifestation of the space and then invade the culture, a culture we often talk about in terms of joy. When MConnex came to me and asked me to do one of their courses on creativity, I have to admit it was a little bit humbling, because creativity can be a very difficult word to define. I believe that most of the things that make us creative are actually quite intangible. And I mean that not just for me and my company, but for anyone in general. How do we define creativity? And I have to admit, the first thing I did was I went to dictionary.com and grabbed the definition to see what they have to say about the word creativity. And of course, definition one wasn't very helpful. It was the state or quality of being creative. Gee, that's going to help me a lot in helping define creativity. It was the next one, though, that really helped me. The ability to transcend traditional ideas, patterns, relationships, or the like, and to create meaningful new ideas, forms, methods, interpretations, etc. Originality, progressive, or imagination. Quite frankly, that's something I can work with, because I think that's been our mission here at my company for all the years we've been in business. We often refer to our mission as to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology, and I think creativity has a tremendous amount to do with that. We talk about the space in this course, we talk about the way we build the team together. One of the things I wanted to make sure I did when exploring what is it, what are those intangible qualities, what are the things that we do that actually lead to our creativity here at my company, I went and asked the team, hey Menlo! Hey Rich! We are going to continue our little mini course on creativity here, and what I would like you to do, I'm going to come around, give you each an index card, and I would like to just have you take a couple of minutes and write down 3 things. It can either be things we do or things we don't do that you believe, practices, techniques, anything about our environment, anything you think that makes this place more creative for you. I'll have you work in pairs, and you just need to write down 3 things in this card, and then I'll come back later and we'll talk about them. So I'm gonna just hand these out. Just take a couple minutes right now, thanks.
I would say, like, come to a more innovative solution. Or brings
different point of view.
Yes.
I definitely feel like it's more creative. I haven't ever worked in an office setting before, but I can tell you in previous jobs, period, I always felt a little scared to share crazy ideas. And here I know if I throw out one, my partner is going to be receptive to it, or at least not shoot it down right away. We can talk it out and see if there's any substance there. It makes it easier to kind of offer up creative ideas, which I think is a little more constrained in other office situations.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I've worked in design jobs elsewhere, and typically there it's a lot more, if you are going to be creative, you're creative by yourself in your cubicle, and then you go take it to your boss. and your boss determines whether you've been creative enough and then gives it back to you and says go be more creative, or says, you know what you have done here isn't good enough, now this is what you really should do.
Or even go be less creative.
Right, like I think it's the collaborative nature here that makes it that much more creative, more than anything else, because you feel free to build upon others' ideas and keep taking it further and further, rather than just, I feel really stuck right now and I don't know how much further to go.
When I describe our culture to people and the environment that we've created to foster that culture, I often refer to it in the context of a heating and cooling system. I use that as a metaphor. Imagine the ductwork in a standard office building that at one level is pulling the air out of the room, cold air return, filtering that air, conditioning it, either heating it or cooling it, and then pumping it back into the room. I think a company culture can be like this. We want to pump two things out of the room. We want to pump fear and ambiguity out and pump safety back in.
This is really a safe environment in that in other places I never would have stood up and made an assertion about something unless I was sure. Because in a lot of places you feel like you have to, pardon my French, cover your ass all the time. And you have to be political about it. You can't expose any weaknesses or lack of knowledge, because then people will think, oh, well, he's not the smart guy, we can't promote him. Whereas here, there's this culture where everybody knows everybody is lacking in something, because we only have our knowledge as a team. And some people know more about one particular thing or some other particular thing, but standing up and saying, I don't know something, is highly encouraged and much more likely to get you rewarded by your peers than keeping silent and making things worse, or just simply working from a flawed understanding of things.
Yes, there are no stupid questions or stupid opinions. All of them boost your creativity.
Safety is an interesting element of a culture. If people come to work and they feel safe, they will begin to trust each other. If they trust each other, they will be more comfortable making mistakes with one another. And once you get into a corporate culture where it's safe to make mistakes, innovation starts to spring forth, and that's where creativity is really going to blossom. You start to have people who are willing to work together, to try crazy ideas, to take chances with one another without fear of being embarrassed or ridiculed, without the ostracization that occurs when somebody says, oh, you're the one who made that mistake way back when. These suddenly become elements of a very powerful culture that can foster all kinds of new ideas, which is what companies want, which is what companies need these days. We need to start thinking in ways we've never thought of before, and it all starts with safety.
The point is kind of that the culture is deliberate here. We all know that we can trust each other and work together as a team. Any problem that one person has is something that we all have to solve. So we'll all work towards solving the problems.
Where are you going to put all your Easter eggs?
When we talk here about good kindergarten skills, the most common phrase we use is, do you play well with others? Well, that speaks right to the heart of collaboration, which we find is an essential ingredient for creativity. Now, most organizations give lip service to collaboration. Here we practice it. We give you a chance to practice collaboration every minute of every day. We work 2 people to 1 computer all day long, working in pairs. These pairs are assigned every week and we switch them every week. And I can tell you this is the most powerful managerial tool I've ever discovered. Getting 2 human beings to work this closely together all day long, trying to solve the difficult problems that our customers have asked us to solve, leads to the greatest amount of creativity, energy, innovation, imagination that you can imagine. On deeper inspection, you see a team of people working here, 2 to a computer. These pairs are assigned every week and we switch the pairs every week. It's a crazy notion, I know, to work this close. And the team has total control over the space itself. They, for years, have chosen to push the table side to side and front to front. They want to be this close to one another. And you can see that the keyboard will flow freely back and forth between the team members. There's a lot of discussion. The idea is to open up collaboration, to give permission for them to work together all day long. And this is the way it works here. 2 people, 1 computer, sharing the keyboard, pointing out the ideas of what they're working on, deciding the right approach, questioning each other, challenging each other. When people come here on a tour, I often show them the space and ask them what they don't see first. And what they don't see are walls. They don't see barriers to communication. There are no cubes, corner offices, walls, doors. We have one big open collaborative space. I often jokingly refer to the fact that when we communicate with one another, we don't use email. We use what I like to call high-speed voice technology, built right into the operating system. Vocal cords, tympanic membranes, auditory nerve stimulation of the brain. Now I can tell you most people who come in here who want to use us for our services begin to wonder, well, Rich, this sounds really neat, but do I actually have to pay for these people? And why is this a more productive way to organize a team of human beings than simply having meetings, simply having an opportunity for people to bump into one another? But we just find that by giving permission to collaborate in this particular way, leads to a kind of safety that we've already talked about, where people have this permission to collaborate all day long, to support one another, to bounce ideas off of one another, to challenge each other along the way, to come up with better ideas, quite frankly, better ideas faster than they would working by themselves. I know it's counterintuitive, but I've watched this now for over a decade, and I can tell you this is a powerful component of the creativity that we do inside my company.
There's times where you are focused really into what you're doing, but you also still get a sense of what other people are doing.
Yeah.
So if you hear something that pertains to what you're doing, then you can jump in right into that conversation.
And it's like there's no walls, so if you're checking your Facebook or if you're kind of just slacking off, I mean, it's so clear. You know, Rich always talks about having an open book policy on everything, and I mean, it's so clear. You're letting your entire team down if you're screwing around or messing with your email or something. So it's kind of like a mind thing. Like, you don't even want to do that because you want to be supporting your team at all times.
I mean, the disco ball alone helps me be creative, so.
When I introduce our culture, I often point first to the physical space of our office, and I talk about the fact that we've made it so that it can be very flexible and that the team has total autonomy over how the space is set up. They can move the tables around without permission. There's no facilities person to go grab. We've put these pull downs from the ceiling so that people can move things around however they like. And because of the way we organize the team members, because we're pairing people and switching the pairs every week, people often end up in very different places in our physical space for all those different reasons. And then those that come to see this wonder, what difference does this really make? Does physical space actually have that much of an effect on creativity and energy and imagination? And I often think about the people who perhaps in the last few years have worked at a company that has gone through a bankruptcy. And they survived the bankruptcy, they went through the process, and you hope that after that occurs, that the company will somehow be different, will be re-energized, will be more creative than they've been up to this point. And you wonder, why is it that it doesn't happen that way? Well, often you see the effect of space in this particular situation. The same people who work for that company get up in the morning, they go through their morning routine like they always have. They get in the same car, they drive down the same roads, they take the same path to work, they perhaps park in the same parking place, they go into the same elevator, they get up to the same floor, they walk to the same cube, they sit down at the same desk, and then they start working the way they've always worked. And you wonder, what are the odds that that person is going to come in that next day, the day after the company has totally been recharacterized and reestablished as a new corporation? What are the odds that those employees are actually going to think differently than they did the day before if they've taken all the same physical pathways to get to their workspace? Now, you don't need something as dramatic as a bankruptcy to consider whether this is a thought worth pursuing. Think about it inside of your own organization. If you want your team to think more creatively, and yet they are still walking down the same paths, they still are burning the same paths in the carpet day in and day out, what are the odds that they're going to think new thoughts, come up with new ideas? It's part of our humanity that we fall into patterns. We fall into patterns of movement, we fall into patterns of thinking, and often patterns of movement and thinking track with one another. Mix it up inside your location. Change people's physical workspace around. Have them move, have them work in a different place. See what happens. See if that starts to spur creativity inside your organization like it does mine.
It's not easy when we first start here because there's so much noise all the time, but after a while you get used to it and your brain starts to pick up on little conversations, and it's kind of like when you hear your name across the room, suddenly you're drawn into it. Now it's more of a, if I hear something about something on a specific project that I might have knowledge about that I know I haven't transferred yet to somebody else, it's that much easier to be like, oh wait, I know, let me talk to you for a second and pick up on that opportunity. You kind of got the hive mind.
Even more than just like overhearing discussions. I mean, if you look around, it just, all the cards on the walls, everything's handwritten. You can erase whatever you want and change it if you need to. Just the free...
As long as your PM authorizes
right,
it.
As long as it's authorized and you talk it out. But I'm just saying there's, Rich calls it freedom through tyranny. So we work on our card, but the whole environment just exudes creativity.
Creativity can be a subtle construct within an organization like mine. Often people come here and ask me, Rich, how did you think of this? How did you create this system? How was it that Menlo came into being? And what are the broadest lessons that anybody who comes to visit here can take away? And often I speak to intention. When people walk in our door, I say to them, welcome to Menlo. You've come to a place that is very intentionally focused its culture on the business value of joy. And when people ask me why I'm speaking of joy, I ask them, well, what part of my team would you have if there was a choice? Would you have a joyful part or would you have an unjoyful part? And of course, everyone who comes here wants the joyful part of my team. And then I ask them why. And they immediately speak to creativity, energy, imagination. We'd be easier to work with. They would get higher quality and so on. And in all of that description, I want to focus on this word intention. When you are the visionary leader for your organization, you have to set a tone. I will say that most organizations in the world today that I run into actually get what I call the default cultural intention. And that is, who did we hire? What attitudes do they carry? What behaviors do we tolerate? Here at Menlo, however, we have been very, very intentional about our culture. And it does have to start with me. It can't end with me. It can't simply be a plaque on a wall. It can't be an exhortation by a leader to say, tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we're going to be creative. It has to be part of everything we do every day. So when we talk about intentionality here in regards to our culture and in regards to creativity, we look to everything that we do here. Every part of our process has to be custom fitted to that intention. So you've seen the physical space here, you've seen how we collaborate. It goes to how we review resumes. How do we bring people in for interviews? What process do we use while interviewing people? What onboarding process do we use for people who pass our interview process? How does work occur here? How do we assign people to tasks? How do we report on their progress? Everything that happens here is custom fitted to this intention that for us revolves around joy. And joy creates an environment where creativity can thrive, where innovation can spring forth, where imagination has permission to play out every minute of every day. And so it starts with the leader, it starts with my intentions for my organization, but it quickly has to translate into everything we do here. It can't simply be a mission statement. It can't simply be a plaque in every conference room that we're going to be a creative organization. It literally has to unfold in every element of what we do inside our company.
And the whole idea of like, two people working independently can get twice as much work done, that's not even close to true. I mean, working together, like we catch so many things that normally you would have just blown past and then spent 4 hours later trying to find, that I think the productivity is significantly more for two people working together than two people working separately at separate computers, each writing parallel.
People become lazy when they work alone, is my assumption.
And it's more fun to work with another person. I mean, working in a cube by yourself, you get lonely even if you don't realize it, even if you're a horrible introvert like me. I mean, I don't like hanging out with people or being social that much, but working with another person during the day, it keeps you engaged, it keeps you focused, it keeps you paying attention to the job and working towards a goal in ways that otherwise you would drift off, or you'd get bored and go check your email 5 more times.
Often when people come here, they say, Rich, this looks great. When you're the entrepreneur, when you're the CEO, when you are the leader of your organization, I can see why you can get away with this. I can see why you can cast a tone, but what about me? I'm inside of an existing older organization. I'm not at the top. I'm somewhere in the middle of the organization. Is there a possibility I can still create an environment like this for my team? And my answer is absolutely. That's where I started. The first time I implemented a process like this, I was a vice president inside of a public corporation, and I wanted to make a dramatic change to how my team operated because I was not experiencing the type of joy we now experience here. And quite frankly, I was getting disillusioned in my current position. I wanted out. All the external measures of me and my organization were, quite frankly, very successful. But it was my heart for what I did as a profession where I was losing my personal flame. And I wanted to improve not only my own condition within that organization, but the condition of all those who worked for me. And so it was a multi-pronged approach. I had to sell the idea to my peers, the other executives inside of this public corporation. I had to sell it to my boss, the CEO. I had to sell it to the board of directors of this public corporation and even some of the major shareholders. And then ultimately, I had to convince my team that this crazy new way of working was actually going to produce great results, not only for the corporation, not only for the shareholders, but for them personally, for their own personal career growth and for their own personal energy for what they did as a profession. And so I very carefully learned to speak in the languages that everyone understood. I had to speak in a different language to my peers on the executive team than I did to my CEO, than I did to my board of directors. I had to understand what their motivations were for the company and relate their motivations to what I was trying to do with my team. And finally, I had to speak to my team. I had to speak to them about a different way of approaching things than was customary, and quite frankly, it was in fact uncomfortable. I was going to be taking away some of the rewards they had gotten very used to inside of the old organization. The titles, the large offices, the doors that close, the quiet work environment, the ownership of their own work, and so on, and move them out into a big open and collaborative environment and have them start collaborating in a way that, quite frankly, they had never experienced before. I had to give them a chance to practice this. I ran some small experiments first so they could personally begin to experience what this change would be for them, and then remind them of what I was seeing as well as, quite frankly, what they were seeing themselves. And it was during that process that I literally transformed an existing 30-year-old organization into an entirely new way of working. It wasn't easy, it wasn't simple, it took some time. Ultimately, it took me about 6 months to literally transform what I call the paths in the carpet in my old organization, but boy, was it worth it. And quite frankly, at the end of the whole process, one of my most senior team members wondered how I was willing to take the risk to make that transformation when I seemingly had everything. And I told him that I decided early on in this whole process that it was the risk of staying the same that was far greater than the risk of changing. And once I made that decision in my own mind, running towards change was easy because I was actually running away from risk. And it was worth it. The results were impressive, and I've never looked back since. Two of the strong cultural imperatives at Menlo are described by two common phrases within our environment. Make mistakes faster and let's run the experiment. These two things are highly related. Often you find in technical teams like mine that the team is reluctant to try new things before they've figured out that it's perfect, before they figured out that they've got exactly the right approach. Well, often trying to figure out the exact right approach to something can take hours, days, weeks, months, sometimes even years. And yet, even with all that investment, you find out later that you've actually made a huge mistake. Our goal, make mistakes faster, run the experiment, find out quickly that something isn't going to work long before you've made a big investment in it. And once you find out it's not going to work, once you've made that quick mistake, correct it, pull back, change direction, try something new. If you can instill a cultural norm inside your organization to run experiments and run experiments frequently and reward quick, short mistakes that get corrected long before they become costly mistakes from which you cannot recover, you begin to create an environment of creativity that moves quickly, that innovates rapidly within your organization, that creates an energy level that's sometimes unprecedented inside of a small or even a large organization.
So when we say we're going to run an experiment, usually we found there's something in whatever kind of hole in our process that just something's not going really well. Or maybe it's just somebody that was brainstorm or just thought of something out of the blue, like, what if we tried this? And typically we just say, okay, let's run the experiment.
And so this whole idea of running the experiment, of trying things without worrying about whether they'll succeed or not, is really an interesting cultural norm within a creative environment. I'll start with an example of one project we worked on years ago. It was for a startup company that was creating a handheld device that would be used by cruise ship travelers to navigate their way around cities that they haven't been to, perhaps in a language they were unfamiliar with. Well, we weren't going to get too many chances to send our high-tech anthropologists on a cruise ship. In fact, we were only going to get one. And we needed to discover a number of things before we sent them on this one excursion that was going to be quite expensive, and we had to do it well enough to gather good data. So our approach was to run an experiment. Let's go find a cruise ship on land. What environment could we go to that would simulate the same environment where you would find families traveling together with children, perhaps in an area with which they're not familiar, so that we could experiment with various aspects of this particular project. For example, we wanted to find out if people even knew how to read maps in general. Well, we ended up running an experiment by going down to a local park in Dearborn, Michigan called Greenfield Village. It's an interesting historical park where a lot of people come to visit every year, and families are traveling around with their children inside the park. And so we got a chance to experiment with interacting with people who are literally on vacation with their family and don't have a lot of time to spend with a team like mine. My team conducting research and that sort of thing. So two of our anthropologists went to Greenfield Village, wanted to find out if people knew how to read maps. They would literally hold a map of the village in their hand while they walked up to someone at the park and asked them, "Excuse me, can you show me the way to the Edison exhibit?" And they would make the map very obvious. They wouldn't say, "Could you show me on the map?" And it was amazing how many people grabbed that map, turned it this way, turned it that way, tried to orient it, handed it back and say, I never can read these things. Well, this was really valuable data that we were able to gather in a very inexpensive way, a short distance from our office, without the big investment of getting on a cruise ship. We eventually did go on that cruise ship, but by the time we got there, the number of experiments we had run inside of Greenfield Village confirmed that we were going to be able to do some very effective data gathering without worrying about whether these things were going to work or not, or running perhaps a very slow, expensive experiment that wasn't going to produce any results. So this whole attitude of make mistakes faster and let's run the experiment really produced great results when it really mattered. In this short course on creativity, I started with a dictionary definition of creativity, which was the ability to transcend traditional ideas, rules, patterns, relationship, or the like, and to create meaningful new ideas, forms, methods, interpretations, etc. I hope in our course today you've gotten a chance to peek into a world that is perhaps very different than the one you're in today. One that turns the traditional world of how organizations should be formed and how teams should be organized into a very different kind of approach. We like to say here that we've changed everything about the way software gets designed and developed. We believe this is essential to the creative process here at Menlo. And if we think about the word creativity, it's almost impossible in our minds to separate creativity from energy, from enthusiasm, from imagination, from collaboration. We've created this wide open, crazy, noisy room where people work to a computer, work side by side all day long, where we're constantly refolding the team in and of itself so that we can share ideas between people to produce better ideas faster than is customary, to create an environment that's safe, that builds trust, that pumps fear out of the room rather than fear into the room. And by eliminating that fear, by creating an environment where people feel safe to work with one another, to collaborate with one another, creativity springs forth. And our hope is by sharing these ideas with you, giving you a peek into a world that has changed how innovation happens, that you have a chance to explore in your own world how this might work for you, what ideas you might be able to take away and practice with and try new things. So I will suggest to you that you think about some simple things perhaps that you saw in the course today and decide for yourselves, maybe there's some small experiments we can run. Maybe there's some small mistakes we could make in our organization to give this a chance to knock down the walls, both literally and figuratively inside your own organization. Thank you for participating in this short course. I hope you had as much fun watching it as I did making it.